So we got a minute to go. So tonight, your discussion board on the fog of war is due, and then next week is a holiday. We have Thanksgiving, so we will not have class. And then let me check the syllabus. What's going on? The syllabus. Here. And then we have so next week's Thanksgiving, then we're going to discuss organizational structure, organizational culture and change, and the exam is on the 17th. And people are worried about the amount of time, but I mark on the curve, so you have nothing to worry about. Okay, tonight we're going to discuss conflict and negotiation, which is an important topic. If we were in live, I would do a bargaining exercise. I used to teach a whole course in conflict and negotiation. I think they have one here. They used to. I know they used to because I introduced it, but I think they still might. But I'm not sure what that they do in that class. But what I used to do is it was about half the sessions were exercises, and we also watched a couple of films. And I think for that type of class, you need a lot of experiential stuff. So anyway, conflict. One party perceives that another one has negatively affected it or is about to. And basically does something in return. So it begins when one party perceives that another has negatively affected it or is about to. And the conflict begins with that perception. And clearly, there's some response and a conflict ensues. Most of the time in life, you don't need to have a conflict. It can be avoided, avoidance. We'll talk about that. Like if it's anything of importance, you can't avoid it. But most conflicts are not that important. And so, if you get into conflicts about unimportant things, then the book Notes from the Underground by Dostoevsky is kind of about that. You get into a pointless conflict. It has huge costs and no benefits. So you don't want to do that. All relationships involve conflict, and there's nothing untoward or undesirable about conflict. It's normal. The thing that you can learn about it is that, first of all, you can't avoid it, but more importantly, you can manage it well. So the idea is to manage conflict well. So, like a lot of things, there's like a mid-range. I think this comes from Aristotle originally, that you want the happy medium. So there's like too little conflict, Here, let me use this thing. It's always a battle with this thing. All right. So this is the quality of outcome. And this is the amount of conflict. And on the left, you can have too little conflict. And on the right, you can have too much conflict. And so what you have is what's optimal. The quality is best at the happy medium, the golden mean. And so basically, it's kind of a simplified view, but I think there's a lot of truth to it. So too much conflict, like the car companies in the 1960s had a lot of labor strife. Car companies. And when we talk about your movie doesn't go into this, they mention it, but it doesn't really go into it. When we talk about the Bay of Pigs invasion in Cuba, there was too little disagreement. There was too little conflict. That's discussed in the book Groupthink by Irving Janis. And so you could say that like too little would also be groupthink and conformity pressure. Conformity. Too little conflict. Whereas too much conflict would be very dysfunctional. It could include war as well. And so basically you want the midpoint. You want like people are able to disagree but not kill each other. And I think in business, it's very often the case in big business. I'm talking about like in a corporate setting. But I think it's also probably true in smaller firms and stores. I've never really worked in small places. I've always worked in major corporations or at least good sized ones or colleges. I never really worked for small business, but there's no reason to think it doesn't apply there too, especially with a dominant individual like an entrepreneur, like a boss. Then everyone just agrees with the boss, kind of, and everyone agrees with each other. Then you don't have a lot of ideas. So you want to encourage ideas, but and disagreement and debate, but not so bad that people hate each other and disrupt things, and labor strife, destroy the company, and so on. So functional conflict supports the goals of the group, and it can be an antidote to groupthink, which is highly valuable. Dysfunctional conflict hinders group performance, and it's too extreme. Apathy is bad, as well as disruption or chaos that can be dysfunctional. Self-criticism and innovation, discussion, disagreement, this is all positive. I would say at colleges, the conflict, the conformity level is so high that there's very, very little creativity. You would think that at college, there's a lot of new ideas. I've never, the corporate world is so much less conformist and groupthinky than colleges. They just echo each other, and they say this. They all have the same ideas, and they're to them, a new idea is one that 50 other people have done. So basically, you want to learn to manage conflict, and the best companies are the ones where there's some conflict, and they're able to manage it well. So in other words, there's plenty of conflict, but they're able to manage it well, so it doesn't go beyond the happy mean. Uh, Relationship conflicts are of an interpersonal nature, and person-oriented conflicts are almost always dysfunctional. So you don't want to focus on conflicts where you hate somebody. We hate the Russians, so we're gonna fight them or something. That's never going to be productive. There's no solution to that. If you hate Russians, there's nothing Russians can do to correct that. So if there's that type of conflict, you probably want to address it and may find a way to eliminate it. Relationship conflict eliminates trust. There's no cohesion. There's lower satisfaction in places with that type of conflict. So, overall, conflicts over personality and people who don't get along with each other or have bad relationships, or they disagree about politics, or something like that. And the last one might seem absurd, but actually, people now segregate more on politics than almost anything else. So it used to be race is much less important now in American society than political differences. So the types of I talked about the types of conflict. So task conflict is different. So if people disagree about how to get something done, or how to perform optimally, it is not going to be directly related to group performance, but it has a positive effect if not associated with relationship conflict. So if people get along but they disagree with the task, then it will have a positive effect. But if it becomes a relationship issue, then it doesn't have as much an effect. Okay, it's not positive, but it's not as bad negatively. Process conflict focuses on how the work is done, delegation and roles, and it can weaken trust and weaken performance. So if you disagree about processes, about delegation, roles, who has power, that's going to create a lot of negativity, and it'll affect the job. I've seen this firsthand. It's not just theory. It'll affect the job. Basically, if people are fighting over who gets the promotion, for example, that's going to be a big. If people are just discussing how to do a job, it won't be bad as long as they can do it amicably. And relationship conflict is almost always dysfunctional. So, like the record, what this is saying, what the book is saying, is that the record of conflict really isn't very good. And the reason is primarily that people don't know how to manage conflict. That's the real issue. People people have bad outcomes from relationship conflict almost inevitably. The task conflict will only be positive if they can keep relationship conflict out of it, and the process conflict is also almost always negative. So a lot of conflict does not have good results, and the trick is to figure out how to manage conflict so that you do mostly have good results. So in other words, you want to eliminate relationship conflicts, and you want to reduce process conflicts to as low as possible, and most of the conflict should be surrounding the task, and those you have to do correctly. You can also categorize, I don't know how important it is, but I mean, there are conflicts that are just between two people, which are dyadic. And then there's conflict within a group, which is intragroup, and then conflict between groups. In a book, Walton and McKersey, A Behavioral Theory of Labor Negotiation, written many decades ago in the 1950s, they analyzed labor negotiations in a large number of settings, and they found that there were four basic kinds of negotiation, which presumably corresponds to conflict. And we'll talk about the first two in a minute, integrative and distributive. And then the remaining two, intra-organizational and attitudinal structuring, or that the leaders of the union had to go back to the union membership and convince them of the deal they had struck with the management. So intra-organizational bargaining was often a big problem, as well as attitudinal structuring, which referred to moving across different kinds of negotiation. So basically, intergroup would be labor and management, intragroup would be intra-organizational, and hopefully they're in a formal negotiation setting, you're not going to have too much dyadic conflict, but of course it exists. In other words, like if Putin and Biden don't get along, that's going to make the intergroup negotiation more complicated. If they do get along, it'll make it easier. And these kind of things occur in any setting, including high-level politics. So basically, for a conflict to occur, there has to first of all be conditions that cause the conflict to occur. Then people perceive it, and there's some kind of emotional involvement. Usually in a conflict, people will feel something, some kind of emotion. Negative emotions are undesirable. They tend to cause us to oversimplify issues, to lose trust, and put negative interpretations on the other party's behavior. The intentions in a conflict can be assertive or they can be cooperative. And, this brings us to the Kilman conflict modes. Oh, I didn't want to stop the share. I just wanted to clear the screen. So I'll go back to that. The Kilman conflict modes. And this is sort of a practical thing. That there are 5 ways. Maybe I'll draw this. There are 5 ways to okay, so this is like supposed to be a quadrant, and you have this breakdown of assertive that I just mentioned, assertive and cooperative. So you have assertive and cooperative. Yeah, I'm not going to do it this way. It's not a good way. Let me change that. So I'll just list them out. I'm not, I did something wrong here. So anyway, you have different levels of cooperation, and four of them are, so the conflict modes. The first four are what might be called distributive, and the last one is integrative. And those terms again come from Walton and McKersey. And basically, distributive conflict is win-lose. So your gain is somebody else's loss. I'm sorry. So, for example, if you play a baseball game or a football game, if you score a touchdown in football, you get 6 points. So you're up 6 points, the other side is down 6 points. So that's win-lose. Integrative would be that both parties win or both parties lose. So in other words, it goes together. You win more. If you win more, the other side wins more. All right. So, for example, let's say I set up an incentive plan with a salesman, and I say to the or saleswoman, and I say to the salesperson, uh, if you for every piece you sell, I will pay you a $5 commission. And the truth is that if the salesperson sells, if he sells, then I will get a $5 profit. So we both gain from that deal. So if the salesperson makes more money, I make more money. Okay, so that would be an integrative solution. Okay, and those are always the best types. That's the type of negotiation you want to engage in. So, for example, the four conflict modes that are distributive, there's only one that you could call it collaborative, that's integrative. And again, these ideas, the distinction, the idea of integrative bargaining came from Mary Parker Follett, who was a progressive management theorist back in early 20th century. So it was over 100 years ago. And when I say progressive, it was related to progressivism, which was progressivism. It wasn't exactly what they mean now by progressive. Progressivism was a political theory that you extend the scope of government and make society more efficient by extending government. It was, I think, a foolish theory, but it became dominant. It's with us now. It guides us in much of our policy making. And the progressives wanted to make society more efficient by, first of all, managing abuses of big business and by encouraging rationalization in government, in law, in public administration, and things like that. And so one of the things Follett recognized in her writings was this distinction between integrative and distributive bargaining. This was then picked up by Walton and McKersey in the 1950s in the behavioral theory of labor negotiations. And they said that the unions and management engaged in both kinds of negotiation, and attitudinal structuring was necessary to transition from one to the other. And then in the 1970s, I think it was, I'm just checking the year, getting to yes, 1981, I'm sorry. In 1981, Fisher and Urey published Getting to Yes, which I highly recommend also. The first two, Walton and McCrae's academic book, Mary Parker Fall, it's mainly of interest for historical reasons. But Fisher and Urey Getting to Yes is a useful book to read for today, for today's management. Now, not everyone agrees with them. George Ross is a Brooklyn College grad and he was the head of the legal department. He was the chief general counsel of the Trump organization and until the 2000s. If you ever see the reruns of that show that Trump was on, he's in the show. He's part of the show, and I invited him to school a couple of times. He came twice, and he wrote a book about negotiation. It's not a hugely famous book or anything, but uh, uh, I just want to tell you what he said. I'm just trying to remember the title of it. Um, uh, oh, he calls it Trump style negotiation. So basically, I think he had another book though. But in any case, he hates uh, he hates integrative bargaining. He thought it was ridiculous. You can see how these guys think. He thought like win-win bargaining is useless. That the only kind of bargaining that you should really engage in is win-lose bargaining. And he's not alone. I would say a lot of people sympathize with it. I think they're mistaken. I think he's mistaken. I think uh, most of the world that involves any kind of progress engages in win-win negotiation. Like if you go to a department store and or you buy something online, you go to a supermarket or whatever, and you want something, you want a hat. So the store has a lot of hats and you want a hat. The store wants your money because they want to get rid of their inventory and make a profit. And you want your money too, but you want a hat more than you want your money. So you make a deal and you're better off because you buy a hat, and the store is better off because they get rid of one of the 1,000 hats they have in stock. So both are better off. So like virtually all business transactions are win-win. And the point of integrative bargaining is just that you want to improve that. If you can find ways to make deals even better for both parties, you should do it. There's a concept in economics called Pareto optimality, and economists often use it to assess whether a given arrangement is efficient. And the idea of Pareto optimality is that you can't make anyone better off without making somebody worse off. Okay, so if you have some distribution of assets and you want to make you say I can do something that's more efficient, it may seem more just to you to take money from one party and give it to somebody who's poorer, say. It may be more just, but it's not Pareto. It doesn't change the Pareto optimality. So in other words, you could have a system that's Pareto optimal. If you have to redistribute wealth to fulfill your moral beliefs, then you're not making the system better, according to this concept, that you only make it better if you can find efficiencies that make no one worse off and make some people better off. And that's kind of the idea of integrative bargaining, that you want to make both parties better off. So you find ways to make both parties better off and squeeze efficiencies out of the negotiation. So to George Ross, that's not a kind of negotiation. That to him is something else. It's creativity or something. To him, the only real negotiation is distributive. And a lot of people think that way. Probably, if you've seen the movie already, that Curtis LeMay, who's a pretty big figure in the movie, was hell-bent on war with the Soviet Union, and before that was a ferocious Air Force commander who firebombed Tokyo and so on. And he saw things basically either destroy them or they're going to destroy us. He had no concept of mutual accommodation in any way. All right, so getting back to the conflict modes, there are basically four that are distributive. The first is probably the most important in many ways, and that's avoiding. So for unimportant minor conflicts, that's cool enough. You do avoiding. Okay, you avoid the conflict. So somebody insults you and you just walk away. A lot of the time, that's the smartest thing to do. It's only if the issue is important that you really can spend time on integrative. The second one is accommodating. I made the space too small. Accommodating is where you do what the other side wants. So if the issue is unimportant to you and the here, let me start from scratch here. Okay, so the first one, avoiding. The second one, accommodating. So the issue is unimportant to you, but the relationship is important. So we want to go out to dinner. My wife has her heart set on going to a barbecue place, so we go to the barbecue place. Okay, to me, it's unimportant. I want to make her happy. We go to the barbecue place. So basically, you accommodate people. Now, when you're at work, you have to accommodate your boss. All right, that's the normal stance of an employee. You're there to accommodate the people who are paying you. The reason is that they're paying you. I mean, you're there for one reason, to be paid. You're not there to like save the world or fulfill yourself. Now, of course, you could say, well, I was there to fulfill myself. So in that case, you might say, well, I'm not going to accommodate them if I'm, let's say I'm a volunteer on the Kennedy campaign, and I like Kennedy and I'm doing it because I like Kennedy. Then if I change my mind, I just won't, can't do it. So I'll just drop out. So I don't need to accommodate anybody. In that situation. But when you're a worker, you are being paid. So of course you have to accommodate your boss, and you do whatever they say. Now, a lot of people have trouble with that, and that's a failing, in my opinion. That, in other words, someone who gets hired to do a job and then says, "Oh, I'm not going to do that job." What they want now, of course, if they ask you, you're hired to do A, like that movie, The Firm, and that's not unheard of. I mean, a lot in a lot of contexts, this idea was also discussed by Chester Barnard, who's in many ways the founder of modern management, and he wrote a book called The Functions of the Executive, and he talked about in that book, one of the many issues he raises is he talks about the zone of indifference. And the zone of indifference is like the bargaining zone. It's where the employee is willing to do what the boss wants. They're willing to accommodate. There may be things that the employee is not willing to do. So in that case, the correct alternative is, well, you have a couple of them. One, you could say, all right, I'll go along with it because I want to keep the job, but I disagree. Or if it's serious enough, you go beyond Barnard's zone of indifference and you say, I'm going to quit. I can't do this job. I refuse to do these things. And I think in the case of McNamara, he had a pretty huge zone of indifference. And I think a lot of the reason is he was power hungry. He wanted power, and he was willing to do stuff that a lot of people would not have been willing to do just because he could keep power. But at a certain point, he obviously had seen enough. And I think part of it, he mentions in there that he didn't even want to talk about what his children went through during the Vietnam War. And he said his wife may have died of the stress, which is like astonishing to me. Something wrong with him, in my opinion. Like he says, we all benefited from it. Then it says his wife died from it. I mean, dying from it is dying from something is not usually thought of as a benefit, but in any case, he eventually wrote a memo to the president. He doesn't say what's in it, but he basically said he voiced a lot of reservations about what was happening in Vietnam, and he pretty much was asked to resign or somehow told to resign or whatever. And so eventually it went past the zone of indifference, but he went along with it for a very long time. So, this thing, oh, he was morally objecting to it. Yes, Patrice.
Yeah. I had a question because didn't he propose to Kennedy that they remove the truce because no one they didn't believe they should be there anymore? And
Yeah,
then Kennedy was assassinated, and then Lyndon B. Johnson is the one who said, "Y'all were stupid for trying to do that, and we're not
yeah,
going to do it."
yeah. It
And
was Johnson.
he disagreed.
Johnson.
So
I heard RFK. I met RFK Jr. recently, and I was at a fundraiser, and he said his uncle had two executive orders on his desk. One to phase out and McNamara mentions this, to phase out the Vietnam involvement, and number two, to uh, reestablish a gold standard, a gold-backed currency. And he had both of those written up in October 1963. He was assassinated in November 1963. This would have been a different world. They were very, very different world if those two things had been signed. So yeah, it was definitely Johnson.
Yeah, because I know from watching and not just hearing the way how he worded things as he was speaking to McNamara, I felt like he was threatening McNamara at the same time and letting him know that this is what killed JFK. This is what got him killed.
You heard that in there? That's interesting.
Yeah, yeah. In
Interesting.
so many words is how he worded things. If you like listen closely, he
Interesting.
worded things in a way that said, you guys shouldn't have tried to do that. So we're not going to do it.
Yeah. It would be an interesting course on the Kennedy assassination. It's there's so many bizarre things about it. I'm not gonna argue with you. I have my thoughts on in the same direction, but it's such a controversial subject and it's so complicated. But yeah, I hear you. Uh, it's uh, it's truly one of the great tragedies of American history. Uh, so, in any case, I went to the Kennedy Museum, the JFK Museum in Hyannisport last summer. It was really great. We drove to Provincetown, P Town, which is really great. I really love it there. And we stopped off in Hyannisport, which is the museum itself isn't that impressive, but you really feel like you're really part of history there. It's amazing. You can see the Kennedy compound right there, so it's uh, it's quite an experience. So, in any case, the third uh, distributive. So these are the distributive approaches. Um, the third one is forcing. And that means you use some kind of threat, violence, fear to compel the other side to do what you want. So, like in the company, the boss says, if you don't do this, you're fired. Or we're going to demote you, or there's going to be some repercussions, or something like that. So forcing is useful where there's a power imbalance, where one side is stronger than the other, where the relationship is unimportant, and where the issue is important. But generally, it is always less productive to use a forcing approach because the danger of retaliation is always there. Okay, even somebody who lacks the power you do can retaliate. They can do sneaky things. They can go behind your back. They can say things to people. They cannot support you when you need it. You ask for information and they somehow lose it, or things like that. So basically, forcing has a lot of drawbacks, but sometimes it's necessary. So, for example, if somebody sells a property and then they don't get payment, clearly there's grounds for a lawsuit. So, lawsuits, strikes, um, uh, war, all of these things would be forcing approaches. Usually not optimal. Okay. The reason forcing approaches aren't optimal is that if you knew the outcome in advance, if both sides know the outcome, then they can just agree to it and not have forcing. So forcing always leads to losses. So forcing is not Pareto optimal. All right. In fact, none of the distributive approaches are Pareto optimal. You could always improve on outcomes when there's a distributive approach. The reason is that you can find inefficiencies. So you can find inefficiencies and make both sides better off, because all of the distributive approaches have costs. And so, of course, you're not always able to identify who's going to bear the cost. And so there may be reason to use distributive. I'm not saying to never use distributive approaches. You have to use them. And in fact, like, people who've studied this in depth find that if you're good at a distributive approach, you'll also be good at an integrative approach. So in other words, people who are good at distributive bargaining are also good at integrative bargaining. Okay, so the fourth one is a little different. It's called compromise. And in compromise, you split the difference. It's not integrative because you're not increasing the pie. You're not finding new alternatives. You're simply taking a fixed pie and distributing it between the two people. Where the issue is small, and the unimportant issue, compromise is often most efficient. Okay, so for example, you're close to a deal, there are a few side issues, you split the difference on all of them, and you have the deal. Okay. The final one, okay, so those are the distributive ones. The final one is integrative. Okay, is a win-win, and that's collaboration. So Fisher and Urey talk about how to achieve this integrative solution, this win-win solution. And basically, the idea is that you invent options for mutual gain, you focus on gains and not losses, you open up a communication, you view the negotiation as a problem-solving approach. Okay, so basically, getting back to your book, negotiation, well, let me finish the conflict process. The conflict management is the use of management and simulation techniques to achieve the desired level of conflict. So some ways to handle conflict include things like policies, in having lower level people get involved in negotiations, socialization and organizational culture, creating processes. If you extend this to cross-cultural contexts, there are going to be additional difficulties. All right. Okay, so just to clarify, I was talking about these different negotiation and conflict resolution approaches. A negotiation is a process in which two or more parties communicate and confer with one another to come to a mutual agreement. So it's just two parties getting together and negotiating. Obviously, negotiation is going to affect relationships. So if you're in an ongoing corporate setting, you need to manage those and make sure that you don't harm the relationship. It's less true if you don't know the other party, you're just in a real estate deal. one of the things in negotiation, there's a lot of studies on how to negotiate. I don't think there's any one right answer, but one thing that's known to affect outcomes is who makes the first offer. Your book kind of discourages you from making the first offer. I don't know that that's right. It, it, I mean, no, it encourages you. I'm sorry, I got it backwards. It encourages you to make the first offer. I don't know that that's right. It depends. What it depends on is what your threat point is. So, to understand the idea of a threat point, I'll draw a picture, but the idea is, let's say you're willing to sell something for $50 and the other party is willing to buy it for $50,000. You might say, how could that possibly be? But there are cases of that. If you ever watch the Antique Roadshow, people often have no idea of what they have. And there was a case I once read about where this art dealer went to the region where Beatrix Potter used to live. And Beatrix Potter was the author of those children's books. Peter Rabbit. Now this is huge. I mean, Peter Rabbit's like very classic. A lot of children have read it. A lot of people are interested in it. And so this guy was like snooping around antique stores in the region where she lived, and he indeed found one of her drawings in an antique store, and the guy was asking $50 for it, and it was worth like, I don't know, $1 million. I don't know. So, he gave the guy the $50 and walked away. That will often happen. So that making the first offer in that case, the $50, was not a good decision. It's a mistake to say it's always a good decision. It's a good decision after you've gotten a sense of what the other party is willing to pay. So you know what the other party is willing to ask. What they're asking for. So you need to get information before you know how to anchor it. Like, on the other hand, if you make an exceptionally high or low offer, like let's say you've got a car that has a Kelly Blue Book value of say 20,000, and you you advertise for it for 50,000. People are just going to ignore it. They'll walk right by. And you could insult people. They say, well, "What are you, crazy? You asking me 50,000? You're trying to cheat me." So basically, making the first offer is not necessarily advantageous. It could be, and basically, to understand what a threat point is, it's really just simply, it's the most, if you're the buyer, it's the most you're willing to pay. If you're a seller, it's the least you're willing to accept. So if you're looking for a job, your threat point is the lowest salary you're willing to accept to take the job. Now, the mistake a lot of people make in looking for a job is they run after the first offer, and they don't ask, well, what kind of salary are you offering? So the company will dictate what the salary is, and that's often unnecessary. In other words, you could have gotten a better salary if you had negotiated. All right. So I think there's a book I can show you on Amazon called How to Make $1,000 a Minute. That's my wife. You see my wife's picture there. Uh, Negotiating Your Salary. Here it is. How to Make $1,000 a Minute by Jack Chapman. I highly recommend this book. It's worth a look. You could get a used one for $1.69. Basically, he goes into a very nice process of how to negotiate your salary. First of all, you wait till they make the offer, and then you play with them a little, and usually you can up it a few percent at least. And the same thing with buying a car. In general, you should not pay the manufacturer's suggested retail price. You should get a 7-8% discount off that. However, in the terrible period following COVID, used cars became extremely expensive. So maybe my advice is false for that time, but it's coming back. Things are coming back to normal now after 3 years. They're still not totally normal, but I think they're getting more normal. So I was looking for a car. It was a two-door Mercedes C-Class, and my wife wanted it for her, for her car, and we couldn't find a two-door. We looked for a year. It was like impossible to find. We found one in Brooklyn, and then the dealer wouldn't sell it to us unless we bought it on credit, which I didn't want to do. So we finally found one in Inglewood, and when we got there, I was going to do what I just said. They're offering like 63 or something. I was going to offer them 58 or whatever it was, and we go there, and they say, "Oh, we're only selling cars at a 5% premium over MSRP." In other words, they were asking for a premium over the sticker price. And we screamed at them, and they said, all right, we'll sell it to you for the sticker price. So they suckered us into buying it for the sticker price. I'd been looking for one for like a year. It was like impossible for me to say no. So, we basically paid the sticker, but in general, you shouldn't. When I bought my BMW, I got like something like a 9% discount off the MSRP. There's no reason why you can't do that usually. So you should always negotiate when you're buying a car. There's always a negotiation in buying real estate. Most of the time, things are negotiable. When George Ross came to my class, he said he negotiated any jewelry he bought. He bought jewelry at Bergdorf Goodman, and he said he negotiated with them. They refused to negotiate. He talked to the manager and so on. They finally sold it to him at a discount. So basically, you can do that with almost anything. A lot of it depends on your personality and how much you like to dicker and negotiate like that. But basically, there's no reason why you can if you want to. All right, so there's a negotiation process that your book talks about, and it's a fairly standard kind of textbook thing. That first of all, if you go into a negotiation, you prepare, you establish some ground rules, you clarify and justify your position, you bargain, and then you close and implement the deal. So the steps to the negotiation process are, first of all, planning and information gathering. You ask, what are the other party's goals? You ask, I forgot to mention this term, which is very important. What is the BATNA of the other side? The BATNA would be the best alternative to a negotiated agreement. And economists call that your opportunity cost. Okay, so basically, what's your best alternative? I had a friend who said he always had an FU job. So in other words, you go to bartending school, and if you ever get fired from your day job, you can get a job as a bartender. All right, so that gives you an alternative. All right, so BATNA means that you have some kind of alternative, and then that serves as the floor to what you can ask for. So if you get something above your BATNA, it's good. Now, of course, you want to optimize that and get as much as you can. But basically, the lowest value that's acceptable to you is your floor. Bargaining usually involves give and take. You close the deal. You have to be attuned to situations and relationships. Individual differences are important. People perceive outcomes in different ways. Personality traits affect negotiation effectiveness. People who are extroverted, open, and honest do the best. But personality and negotiation outcomes are weakly related. They're only weak. The relationship is weak. People who are likable and ambitious tend to be good bargainers. Also, people who have high self-efficacy and EI, emotional intelligence, may be related to success in negotiation. So methods can make a difference. Anger can induce concessions if the party has power. If the party has no power, then that's less true. However, having a history of showing anger induces concessions because the other party perceives them as tough. So somebody who shows anger a lot tends to be viewed as tough. However, if you're too aggressive, you go past the other party's threat points and they'll walk away. There's a lot of whole literature on cross-cultural negotiation. If people are from different cultures, outcomes are best if they're open, encourage learning, avoid time pressure. There's gender differences in negotiation. That's sort of an interesting topic. I think one that probably yields some rich insights. Females are less likely to initiate negotiations than males, but the differences are slight, and females can be more competitive in tit-for-tat strategies. Men can be more unethical. Okay, so there are definitely gender differences, and that's an interesting question. In the social context, integrative bargaining works best. For obvious reasons. You want to maintain a relationship. You want to have a win-win kind of approach. People who are known to have integrity are often going to be more successful. Now, just another point about the threat point. So, a threat point is basically where you're not willing to go beyond that point. So, for a worker, he's not willing to work
for below a given wage. For a company, they're not willing to pay more than a given wage. So, if you look at like, say, a worker in a company or a union and the company, there's two things you could say. It could be effort or output or productivity, something like that, and pay. All right. And at zero effort, someone's unemployed, so they're willing to put out a lot more effort. And the company's willing to pay a lot of extra money for additional effort. However, at a certain point, the company starts saying, we don't really want that much more effort. We don't need it. So it kind of levels out and it's asymptotic. It kind of approaches some maximum above which they're not willing to pay. So the company's willing to pay for a given level of effort. They're willing to pay below this line, but not willing to pay above the line. And the employees are similar. In other words, at a low level of effort, a low level of money, they're willing to put out a lot more effort. But at a certain point, they get exhausted and they're going to ask for a lot more money for a little more effort. Okay, so they're not willing to put out more effort than is along this line, and the company's not willing to pay more money than is above that line. So if you look at this is a zone where both sides can agree that at this point, the company is paying less for a given amount of effort that it wants, and the employee is being paid more for the same amount of effort. So they can make a deal. They can strike a deal here. Now, these lines are the threat points. They're beyond that, the firms aren't willing to pay. So the question for the union is, how do we get up, so close to the employer's threat points that we get as much as possible from them without them saying no? And the company is, saying the same thing. That how can we give them as little as possible without them saying no? Now, that may not be true. I mean, I think this is a kind of a narrow view. However, you'd often have a situation, let's say those are the threat points. You might say, okay, well, let's do it in the middle. Or the company might say, look, we don't mind being generous. We want you to be highly motivated, so we'll pay you up here. A lot of companies do. You've all heard, or you should have heard of Henry Ford's $5 day. So he just came out and said, look, I'm not gonna mince words. I'll pay you guys top dollar. At that time, workers were making $2 a day. And he said, I'll pay you guys top dollar, but I want high productivity. And he announced the $5 day. It went from like 80% turnover to 0% turnover. They were getting employment applications from all over the country. People were swarming to work at Ford Motor, and the productivity rates went up 80%. So he largely covered the labor cost through higher productivity. And the turnover rates went down, the conflict levels went down. He wasn't later in life a great manager, but this was an incredible insight. So basically, the question is, what kind of deal is struck within this zone of indifference for the two parties? And that's where you get into a lot of psychological stuff. So that's where, you can view bargaining as an economic issue, and you say, well, if there's a strong labor market and it's very tight, nobody has trouble finding jobs, then the employer can push up their pay. So it could be supply and demand affects wages. but it's also true for any labor market, psychological variables will affect how much people are paid. So people can negotiate higher levels of pay than other people doing the same work. Okay, they can present themselves differently. They can convince bosses that somehow they're worth more. And so you can play games within the zone of indifference. All right. Okay. So we're getting close to the end. So, well, we still have a little time, but I'll take attendance and let you go a little early. Let me, okay. I can actually use my reel. I can use my reel. Grade book. Okay, Afzal, Mohammed, Nabia Ahmed,
Mohammed's here.
Mohammed. Okay, Mohammed Afzal. Okay, thanks.
Mohammed Absol or Mohammed Sarwar?
No, Afzal. Okay, but
Oh.
you're Sarwar.
Yeah.
I don't see the screen here. Okay, I'll give you credit. You can go once you're. Okay, got you. Okay, Afzal not here. Nabia Ahmed, Rima Akhtar, Nagoraktan Akhmadova, Ali Omar.
I'm here, Professor.
Okay, have a nice week. See you in 2 weeks, guys. Remember, next
Yes,
week's Thanksgiving. Chastity Aquino, Nita.
I'm here.
Okay. Natalie Ben Yosef.
Here.
Okay. Ariana Besesser.
Here.
Okay, have a nice weekend, everybody. Alicia Brooks.
Here, Professor. Enjoy your Thanksgiving.
Thanks, you too. Anthony Castaneda. And don't forget your discussion board is due tonight.
I'm here, Professor.
Okay, Anthony.
Thank you.
Alea Charlton.
Here, Professor. Have a good break.
You too. Jerica Cepeda. Jerica. Okay, Soraya Chattery.
I'm here, Professor.
Okay. Have a nice break. Glory Christian. Crystal Clark.
I'm here, Professor.
Okay, take care, Crystal. Elizabeth Desai.
Here.
Take care. Chinyan Ding.
Yes, I'm here.
Have a nice break. Vladimir
too.
Duval Saint.
I'm here.
Okay, have a good break,
You too.
Vladimir. Benvante Fogler. Benvante. Okay, Jordan Glenn Williams. Jordan. Dipu Hossein. Zimin Huang.
I'm here, Professor.
Have a good break.
That's it.
Tanya, thank you. Tanya Ingram. Prince Andy Isaac. Yi Lin,
I'm here, Professor.
have a good break, Yi.
Thank you, you too.
Thank you. Aman, oh wait, Karen Liu,
Hey, Professor. Good night.
good night, Karen. Aman Malik,
I'm here.
okay. Joshua Mamie,
How are you, Professor? Have a great Thanksgiving.
you too, Josh, be well. Patrice McIntyre,
Have a good weekend. Well,
you too,
Thanksgiving.
be well, be well. Alexandra Melendez,
I'm here, Professor.
have a nice holiday,
You too.
thank you. Afra,
I'm here.
take care,
Me too. Bye.
thank you. Deanna Pierre Lewis, Deanna. Miftal Proga,
Hello. I'm here.
have a
Have a
nice
great day.
break. Okay, take care. Guoming Kwan,
I'm here. Have a good break.
you too. Asif Rahman, Asif. Rafikar Rahman,
I'm here, Professor. Have a good
have a
night.
nice, thanks, have a nice holiday. Safayat, he's usually on the discussion board. Charles Rowan,
I'm here.
be well.
Thank you, you too.
Okay, Robert, he's usually on the discussion board. Lauren, Margarita Sherback,
Hello, Professor. I'm here. Have a
great,
happy
have a nice holiday.
evening. Thank you.
You're welcome. Hafsa Siddiqui,
I'm here. Have a good day.
you too. Giovanni Simon, Chanel Sterling, Janiton Surawardi,
Here, Professor. Have a good break.
you too. Sanzita Tanya, Israel Tlatelpa,
I'm here, Professor. Have a good day and happy Thanksgiving.
you too, sir. Makeda Tony,
Here, Professor. Have a good
you too. Abigail Tuachi,
Here.
okay, be well, have a nice holiday. Ashley, oh wait, oh, well, is Ashley here? Okay, Ghazi Udin,
I'm here, Professor.
have a nice holiday.
You.
Thank you. Yoland,
I'm present, Professor. Happy holiday.
you too.
Thanks.
Okay, Joyce,
Hi, Professor. I'm here.
have a nice holiday.
You too. Thank you.
Haorong Jian,
Yes, I'm here.
okay, be well, have a nice holiday.
You too.
Thank you. Xiao Hua Yan,
I am here, Professor.
okay, have a nice holiday.
You
I'm
too.
gonna call, thank you. I'm gonna call the names that didn't answer. If you're here, let me know. Mohammed Afzal, Nabia Ahmed, Rina Akhtar, Nagor Akhtan Akhmedova, Chastity Aquino, Anthony Castaneda, Glory Christian, Ben Vante Fogler, Jordan Glenn Williams, Dipu Hossein, Tanya Ingram, Prince Andy Isaac, Deanna Pierre Louise, Asif Rahman, Safayat Rahman, Robert Rubino, Lauren Segal, Giovanni Simon, Janiton Surawardi,
Sanzita Tanya. And anyone else? Ashley Vasquez. I think Ashley Vasquez had trouble with the microphone. Is that? Yeah, okay. Okay. Ashley, are you still here? Ashley? Okay, all right. So have a good night. And Miftal, did you have a question or something?
No, I was just waiting to hear everyone's names just in case.
Okay,
Have a
I
great
got
day.
you. You don't have to worry. Everything's fine. Okay. What do I do with that? Let me just double check, make sure your name is there. Yeah, you're good. No worries. Chanel? Chanel? Ashley? All right, I guess that's about it. Okay, have a good night.